At the Pistol's Point by E.W. Hornung. The church bells were ringing for Eversong, croaking across the snow with short, harsh strokes, as though the frost had eaten into the metal and made it hoarse. Outside, the scene had been a cheery sparkle, all the peaceful glamour of an old-fashioned Christmas card. There was a snow-covered village, with the church spire coated down one side, the chancel windows standing out like oil paintings, the silver sickle of a moon, and the ideal thatched cottage with the warm red light breaking from the open door, and the peace of heaven seemingly pervading and enveloping all. Yet on earth we know that this peace is not, and the door of the ideal cottage would have been closed and shut by a crushed woman whose husband had now refused her pennies for the plate, with a curse which followed her into the snow. And the odor prevailing beneath the thatched roof was one of hot brandy and water, mingled with the fumes of some rank tobacco. Old Fitch was over 60 years of age, and the woman on her way to the church was his third wife. She had borne him no child, nor had Fitch son nor daughter living with who had set a foot inside his house. He was a singular old man, selfish and sly and dissolute, yet not greatly disliked beyond his own door, and withal a miracle of health and energy for his years. He drank to his heart's content, but he never was drunk, nor was a Sunday's bottle ever known to lose him the soft side of Monday's bargain. By trade he was a game dealer, corn factor, moneylender, and mortgagee of half the village. In appearance, a man of medium height with bow legs and immense round shoulders, a hard mouth, shrewd eyes, and wiry hair as white as the snow outside. The bells ceased for a moment. There was no sound in the cottage but the song of the kettle on the hob. Then Fitch reached for a brandy bottle and brewed himself another steaming bumper. As he watched the sugar dissolve, a few notes from the organ reached his ears, and the old man smiled cynically as he sipped and smacked his lips. At his elbow his tobacco pipe and the weekly newspaper were ranged with the brandy bottle, and he was soon to enjoyment of all three. Over the paper Fitch had already slept after a particularly hearty midday meal, but he had not so much as glanced at the most entertaining pages, and he found them now more entertaining than usual. There was a scandal in the High Life running to several columns, and subdivided into paragraphs labeled with the most pregnant headlines. The old man's mouth watered as he determined to leave this item to the last. It was not the only one of interest. There were several suicides, an admirable execution, a burglary, and what? Fitch frowned as his new eye came tumbling down the paragraph. Then all at once he gasped out an oath and sat very still. The pipe in his mouth went out. The brandy and water was cooling in his glass. You might have heard them singing the psalms at the church nearby. But the old man heard nothing, saw nothing, and thought of nothing but the brief paragraph before his eyes. Escape from Portland. One convict killed, another wounded, but the third gets away clean. The greatest excitement was caused at Weymouth yesterday morning when the report was being circulated that several convicts had effected their escape from the grounds of the Portland convict establishment. There appears to have been a regularly concerted plan on the part of the prisoners working in one of the outdoor gangs to attempt to regain their liberty, as yesterday morning 3 convicts bolted simultaneously from their party. They were instantly challenged to stop, but as the order was not complied with, the warders fired several shots. One of the runaways fell dead, another was so badly wounded that he was immediately recaptured, and is now lying in precarious condition. The third man, named Harry Cattermole, continued his course despite the succession of shots, and was soon beyond the range of rifles. He was pursued for some distance, but was ultimately lost in view of the thick fog which prevailed. A hue and cry was raised, and search parties continued to scour the neighborhood long after dark, but up to a late hour his recapture has not been effected. Cattermole will be remembered as the man who was sentenced to death some years ago for the murder of Lord Walborough's gamekeeper near Bury St. Edmund, who afterwards received the benefit of the doubt involved in the production of a wad which did not fit the convict's gun. In spite of the successful efforts then made on his behalf, however, the authorities of Portland described Cattermole as a most daring criminal, and one who is only too likely to prove a danger for the community as long as he remains at large. Fitch stared stupidly at the words for several minutes after he had read them through. It was the last sentence which at length fell into focus with his seeing eye. Henry Cattermole at large. How long had he been at large? It was a Sunday paper, but the Saturday edition. This was among the latest news. But it said yesterday morning, and that meant Friday morning last. So Henry Cattermole had been at large since then, and this was Sunday evening, and that made entirely 3 days altogether. Another question now forced itself upon the old man's mind. How far was it from Portland Prison to this room? Like most rustics of his generation, old Fitch had no spare knowledge of geography. He knew his own countryside and the road to London, but that was all. Portland he knew to be on the other side of London. It might be 10 miles, it might be 200. But this he felt to be shuddering heart and shaking bones, that near or far, deep snow or no snow, Henry Cattermole was either recaptured or else on his way to that cottage at that moment. The feeling sucked the blood from the old man's vessel, even as his lips strained the tumbler he had filled with so light a heart. Then for a little he had spuriously courage. He leant back in his chair and laughed loud, but it sounded strangely like an empty cottage. He looked up at the bell-mouthed gun at the chimney-piece, and that gave him greater confidence, for he kept it loaded. He got up and began to whistle, but stopped in the middle of a bar. "Curse him," he said aloud. "They should have hanged him, and then I should never been held like this. It'll be a good job to take a hanging now, for I've fair to feel afraid. I do as long as Henry Cattermole's alive." Old Fitch opened his door for a moment and saw the thin moon shining on the snow, but no living soul abroad, and for once he was in want of a companion. However, the voices of the choir sounded nearer than ever in the frosty air, and heartened him a little as he shut the door again, turned the heavy key, and shot both bolts well home. He was still stooping over the bottom one when his eyes fell upon a ragged trouser leg and a stout stocking planted close behind him. He was instantly joined by another ragged leg and another stout stocking. Neither made a sound, for there were no shoes to the cat-like feet, and the stockings were remarkable for a most conspicuous stripe. Then old Fitch knew that his enemy had found him out, and would not stir. He was waiting for a knife to plunge into the center of his broad, round back, and when a hand slapped him there instead, he thought for a moment he had been stabbed indeed. When he knew that he was not, he turned around, still stooping, in a pitiable attitude, and a new shock greeted him. Could this be Henry Cattermole? The poacher had been a stout and thick set, and the convict was gaunt and lean. The one had been florid and youthful, the other was yellow as parchment, and the stubble on his cropped head and the fleshless jaw was of leaden gray. That ain't Henry Cattermole," the old man whispered. "No, it ain't. But 'twas once, and means to be again. Led the way in beside the fire. Wish you'd sometimes use that front parlor of yours. I had it to myself this half an hour, and that's cold." Old Fitch led the way without a word, walking innocently up to the fire, and suddenly sprang for his gun. He never reached it. The barrel of a revolver screwed around his ear, and drove him reeling across the floor. "Silly old fool," hissed Cattermole. "Did you think I'd come to you unarmed? Sit down in that chair before I blow your brains out." Fitch obeyed. "I can't make out," he shuddered, "why you've fair to come to me at all." "Of course you can't," said Cattermole ironically. "If I'd been you, I'd have run anywhere where it's known so well." "You would you? Then you'd know I'd got out, old man." "Just been a-reading about it here in the paper." I see, I see. I caught a bit of what you were saying to yourself, just as I was thinking it was safe to thing to come out of that parlor of yours. So, that was you locking me out, was it? Yet you pretend you don't know why I come. You know well enough. You know. The convict had seated himself on the kitchen table and was glaring down at the trembling old man in the chair. He wore a long overcoat, and under it some pitiful rags. The cropped head and the legs swinging in the striped stockings were the only incriminating features, and old Fitch was glancing from one to the other, wondering why neither had saved him from the horrible interview. Cattermole read his thoughts, and his eyes gleamed. "So you think I've come all the way here to do you?" he cried, tapping his shin. "I tell you, I've walked and walked till my bare legs was frozen, and then sat down in the hedge and slipped on those and rubbed them to life again. Where do you think I got the rotten old duds? Off a scarecrow in the field, I did. I wasn't going to break into no houses and leave my tracks all in line. But yesterday I got a long lift and a good train, and I wouldn't be here now. And last night I did a crack in a crib for this overcoat and a bit of supper and another of the shooter. That didn't so much matter then. I was within 20 mile of you. And you old devil, do you hear?" Fritch nodded with an ashen face. "Now, do you know why I've come?" Fritch moistened his blue lips. To murder me," whispered like a dying man. "That rests with you," said the convict, fondling his weapon. "What do you want me to do?" "Confess." "Confess what?" whispered Fitch. "That you swore me away to the trial." The old man had been holding his breath. He now expelled it with a deep sigh, and taking out a huge red handkerchief, wiped the moisture from his face. Meanwhile, the convict had desired writing materials on the softener, and placed them on the table with a brandy bottle and a tobacco jar. "Turn your chair around for writing." Fitch did so. "Now take up your pen and write what I tell you. Don't cock your head or look at me. I hear the psalm singing as well as you do, and they've only got started, and nobody'll hear us for another hour. Pity you didn't go too, isn't it? Now write what I tell you, word for word, or so help me, you're a stiff'un." Fitch dipped his pen in the ink. After all, what was he about to write that would be written under dire intimidation? No one would attach any importance to statements so obtained. He squared his elbows to task. "I, Samuel Fitch," began Cattermole, "do hereby swear and declare before God Almighty, have you got that down? That I, Samuel Fitch, did bear false witness against my neighbor Henry Cattermole at his trial at Bury Assizes, November 29th, 1887. It is true that I saw both Henry Cattermole and James Savage, his lordship's gamekeeper, in the woods at Walborough on the night of September 9th in the same year. It is true that I was there by appointment with Savage and his wife in her evidence. It is not true that I heard a shot and heard Savage sing out, 'Henry Cattermole,' as I came up before I ever had a word of it. That statement was deliberate fabrication on my part. The real truth is... Hold on. I'm likely going too fast for you. If I'd had in my head that long, how much have you got down?" "Fabrication on my part," repeated the old man, trembling with a trembling voice, as he waited for more. "Good. Now pull yourself together," said Cattermole, suddenly cocking his revolver. "The real truth is that I, Samuel Fitch, shot James Savage with my own hand." Fitch threw his pen down. "That's a lie," he gasped. "I never did, and I won't write it." The cocked revolver covered him. "Prefer to die in your chair, eh?" "Yes." "I'll give you 1 minute by your own watch." Still covering his man, the convict held out his hand for the watch, and a momentary contact with a cold, damp one was dropped into his palm. Cattermole placed the watch upon the table, where both could see the dial. "Your minute begins now," he said, and all the watch was ticking like an 8-day clock. Fitch rolled his hand from side to side. 15 seconds, said Cattermole. The old man's brow was white and spangled like the snow outside. "Half time," said Cattermole. 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds passed. Then Fitch caught up and, "Go on," he groaned. "I'll write any lie you like. That'll do you no good. No one will believe a word of it." Yet the perspiration was streaming down his face. It splashed up on the paper that proceeded to write, in trembling characters at Cattermole's dictation. "The real truth is that I, Samuel Fitch, shot James Savage with my own hand. The circumstances that led to my shooting him I will confess and hereby explain. When I had fallen, I heard a shout and someone running up. I got behind a tree, but I saw Harry Cattermole, the poacher, trip clean over the body. His gun went off in the air, and when I tried to get up again, I saw he couldn't because of his twisted ankle. He never saw me. I slipped away and gave my false evidence, and Harry Cattermole was caught escaping the wood with his hands and his knees, with blood upon his hands and clothes, and an empty gun. I gave evidence against him to stop giving evidence against me, but this is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God." Cattermole paused. Fitch finished writing. Again, the eyes of the two men met, and those of the elder gleamed with a cunning curiosity. How did you know?" he asked, lowering his voice and leaning forward as he spoke. "2 and 2, was the reply. I put 'em together as soon as I ever saw you in the box." "They'll never believe you got like this." "Well, not. Wait a bit. You're not done. As proof, I do say, do you hear me? As proof of what I say, the gun in which the wad will fit that saved Henry Cattermole's life will be found." Cattermole waited until the old man had caught him up. "Now," he said, "you finish the sentence yourself." "What?" cried Fitch. "Right where the gun's to be found. You know, I don't. And then sign your name." "But I don't know." "You do. Well, I sold it." "You wouldn't dare. You've got it somewhere. I've seen it in your face. Write down where, and then show me the place, and if you've told me a lie—" The revolver was within a foot of the old man's head, which had fallen forward between his hands. The pen lay blotting the wet paper. Cattermole took the brandy bottle, poured down a stiff dram, and pushed it under the other's nose. "Drink," he said. "Then write the truth and sign your name. Maybe they won't hang an old man like you, but by God, I shan't think twice about shooting you if you don't write the truth." Fitch gulped down the brandy and took the pen once more, and was near the end of his own death warrant when the convict sprang lightly from the table and stood listening to the center of the room. Fitch saw him too, and listened to. In the church they were singing another hymn, and the old man saw by his watch, still lying on the table, that must be the last hymn, and in a few minutes his wife would be back. But that was not at all. There was another sound, a nearer sound. The sound of someone outside the door. The handle was turned, the door was pushed, but Fitch himself had locked and bolted it. More whispers than a rat-tat. "Who is it?" cried Fitch, trembling in excitement, as he started to his feet. "The police! Let us in, or we break your door!" There was no answer. Cattermole was watching the door. Suddenly it turned, and there was Fitch in the act of dropping his written confession into the fire. The convict seized it before it caught, and with the other hand he hurled the old man back into his chair. "Finish it," he said, below his breath, "or you're a dead man. One or the other of us is going to swing. Now then, under the floor of that room did you hide your gun? Let them hammer. The door is strong, but what room is it? In all your bedrooms? Now sign your name." Deafening crash, and the lock had given. Only one bolt held firm. "Sign!" shrieked Cattermole. A cold ring pressed against the old man's temple. He signed his name and fell forward to the table in a dead faint. Cattermole blotted the confession, folded it up, and strode over to the door, smiling, and flung it open to the prisoners.